Austin, Texas. December 6th, 2014. 23-year-old Joseph had been staying with his mother Kathy while waiting for his assignment from the Navy. He had been out all night with friends and returned home just after noon the next day. Everything on his mum's road seemed as peaceful as ever. The house was quiet when he entered. He checked each room for his mom before heading into her bedroom. No sooner had he stepped foot inside, he was on the phone to 911.
Hey, I need you to come to my house right away.
What's happening, Dexter?
Steve Brown is dead. He's gonna go in. They killed my mom.
What's your mom's name?
Her name is Kathy Blair.
Police taped off the house and a homicide investigation was underway. Kathy Blair had been murdered. After 2 divorces, 53-year-old Kathy Blair was throwing herself into work and spending time with her children. Kathy's sister said she was very strong in her convictions. She knew what she wanted and was never afraid to go for it. She was definitely the boss and wasn't afraid to speak her mind. Her passion since she was young was singing. When she moved to Austin, she knew she would make it her career. She became the director of the Christian Choral Society of Austin, a music program for homeschooled students, and taught singing lessons on the side. Kathy lived on the 4600 block of the Tamarack Trail, a home on a quiet suburban street where everyone knew everyone, and just minutes away from the busy and vibrant atmosphere that she also loved being a part of.
Tonight, police are asking for your help to solve the murder of a popular music teacher. Kathy Blair was found dead in Northwest Austin in her home Saturday afternoon.
Back at the house, the police were piecing things together. It might seem cliche to say, but it really was not the type of area you would ever expect anything like this to happen in. Crime was so low, and detectives said nighttime burglaries were unusual anyway, but especially in places like this. To just take a chance walking into someone's house on a quiet street where many had guns was just so risky. Kathy was so well liked, no one could think of anyone that would want to cause her harm. She had been choked and stabbed, fighting back until eventually her throat was slashed. There was no evidence of a sexual assault. The light switch had blood on it, so it seemed that Kathy had been asleep and the murder had happened in the middle of the night. Once Kathy was dead, they flipped on the switch to look around. Robbery looked like the motive, as her jewellery box had been pulled out and completely emptied. But there were valuables still lying around, like a laptop, a Kindle and a phone. So why hadn't they been taken as well? Had the scene been staged? The more they looked around, the more they felt this showed signs of a targeted hit, not a random robbery. Joe said his mom never locked the back door. Few people did on that street. It was just that kind of neighbourhood. As there was no forced entry, this was clearly how her killer had got in. They ruled out the people closest to her quickly, but they did think whoever did this likely knew she left the back door open, so they must have been known to her. The killer had clearly spent a lot of time making sure there was no DNA or fingerprints left behind. Kathy's blood was everywhere, but no one else's was. As well as the jewellery, a pillowcase was missing. Potentially, this was how they got her belongings out of the house. There was one big clue they hadn't got rid of, however, a bloody shoe impression on the floor. It was a size 10, and they could tell the brand too, so this was something to work with.
Students had been preparing for this concert for 6 months.
5 days after her murder, 100 of her students came together and performed the Christmas concert they had been practicing with her.
Hearts, they sang out loud for the heavens to hear.
Unlike some folks, she just had enough love to pass out that the cup never emptied.
While there have been plenty of tears, they know this is what their beloved teacher, Kathy Blair, would have wanted. She's been giving the gift of music to students for decades.
There are tears of sadness.
They didn't want to let her down, and it was very emotional. Every student she had, past and present, turned up to watch and take part if they wanted to.
He says Kathy has impacted thousands of lives. and that was clear throughout the concert.
I can't tell you how proud all of us are as parents with how our kids have kind of stepped up in very, very trying circumstances. And like I say, that's a tribute to Kathy.
We're told Kathy's funeral is planned for December 20th. Reporting from St. Austin's Catholic Church, Amanda Brandeis, KXAN News.
As people were saying goodbye to the loved music teacher, investigators got an interesting call from one of Kathy's neighbours, Rob. About 12 hours before Joe found her at 1:16 a.m, Rob had been outside his house with his camera testing a new thermal scope he was excited to try. A thermal scope detects radiation, but it doesn't need light to produce an image, so images can look clear and bright even when it's pitch black. Rob had been filming some deer when he spotted a car pulling up just down the road. He watched as someone got out and started walking towards Kathy's house. Someone tall, with broad shoulders, and with what Rob thought was an unusual walk. It was only when he read that Kathy had been killed he remembered what he had seen and knew he had to turn the footage over. Detectives watched and agreed. This video was unsettling. The person walked right into Kathy's front garden. This gave them a time frame of somewhere between 1:30 and 4 a.m. Obviously nothing could be made out past the build and the distinctive walk, but experts did think they were looking for a dark-coloured Toyota. Another lead then came just over a week after Kathy was killed, but it was a tough pill for investigators to swallow, to say the least. Police had been called to the 1700 block of Brentwood Street, just a few miles from Kathy's house. 85-year-old Sidney Shelton and his wife, 83-year-old Billie, had also been found murdered in their home. Their nurse had walked in and discovered them beaten and strangled next to each other in bed. Billie had been stabbed many times in her face, and the knife was still lodged in her eye. The same as Kathy's bedroom, theirs was trashed, and a jewellery box had been rifled through and emptied with the drawers pulled out. The same detectives were assigned to the case, and they said the whole scene gave them déjà vu. Sidney and Billie had been married for 64 years, retired for 25 years, and had a big family around them. They lived a simple and quiet life, just enjoying being with their grandchildren and going to church. Their pastor said they were just warm-hearted, precious people. They loved this area, loved being around the kids. They were soft. They were people you could always count on. They had just been looking forward to Christmas with their family. Police now had to ask the question, were they dealing with a serial killer? There was nothing connecting Kathy to the Sheltons at all, but the crimes were almost identical, so they had to wonder. One of Kathy's friends then shared something with the detectives. Kathy had told her about a handyman who had done some work in their home. He left her feeling so uncomfortable and creeped out, she never wanted him back. They asked Kathy's landlord about him, and he said the person they were looking for was Timothy Parlin. 49-year-old Timothy was actually on parole, having served time behind bars for various crimes, including jewel heists. His criminal record was so long, when they added up all the time he had served, it was more than 20 years. He was definitely a hardened criminal, but did this make him a murderer? As well as doing odd jobs around town, Tim was working in a 7-Eleven and living in a long-stay hotel with his wife. When police knocked at his door, they noticed right away that his height and build did not match the images they had seen on the thermal scope outside Kathy's home. He refused to let them inside, however, saying his wife would get upset, and instead sent them away with a DNA swab and an alibi to check out. He said he was on shift at 7-Eleven over those days and didn't come home until late. Eyebrows were raised when this alibi turned out to be false, so they went back to the hotel. Tim wasn't in, but this time his wife was, and she was actually happy to let them inside for a chat. She said they both knew the Shelton couple from church. She also knew all about Kathy from the news. His wife led them to a receipt for a necklace that Tim had pawned about 12 hours after Kathy was killed. The investigators said they knew in this moment that Tim was absolutely involved. Surveillance from the pawn shop clearly showed Tim and the car he was driving, which turned out to be his sister's. A dark green Toyota, no less. They got a warrant to impound the car, and as soon as they opened the passenger side door, they saw blood all over the seat. A swift turnaround on the DNA showed it was a match to Kathy. After a tough interrogation, Tim told detectives they needed to speak to a man named Shawn Gant Benalcazar. He said this man had not only killed Kathy, but Billie and Sidney Shelton too. Tim admitted to wanting to rob both houses, but he was just there for the valuables, repeating over and over, these hands didn't kill anyone. During their search of his hotel room, they found drugs, so they were able to keep him in custody on a parole violation while they looked into this random new name, which they admitted they believed was totally made up. A search of Shawn's name on the system did show someone by that name, but he had no criminal record, a successful career in teaching, and lived more than 3 hours away from Kathy and the Sheltons. They tracked Shawn down and got him to come in for an interview. He seemed tired and a bit out of sorts, telling them he had just taken a Valium and was worrying the police were going to pressure him into saying something that wasn't true. But detectives, genuinely not believing this man had anything to do with it, told him at the top of the interview their questioning was voluntary and Shawn could leave at any time. They were hoping to rule him out quickly and focus back on Tim, who they believed was just throwing names out there to give himself more time.
We're investigating a murder in Austin, and in particular, we're looking at Tim Parlin as the person that we believe committed the murder.
I'm curious because I'm completely in the dark on this. Who was murdered?
The thing is, honestly, I want to help you guys out because this guy, wolf in sheep's clothing, basically, didn't tell me anything about his past.
As they expected, Shawn said he had no knowledge of the murders, but he did admit to being in Austin and staying with Tim at the time of the homicides. This seemed a very unlikely friendship, but Shawn said he knew Tim because his sister was dating Tim's nephew. Shawn's story then started changing left and right, and he eventually said that he and Tim had stopped in a random neighbourhood for no particular reason in the early morning hours of December the 6th, Kathy's neighbourhood.
Remember the name of the street? No, I never remember street.
Tim went into what turned out to be Kathy's house, returning covered in blood and holding a pillowcase full of jewellery.
Sack had blood on it, threw it in the passenger floorboard, and I took a peek at it, it had jewelry in it, and I didn't want anything to do with it. The fact that it had blood on it was not a good sign.
Detectives knew this was going to be a long back and forth as they pulled the truth out bit by bit, so they decided to take a cigarette break. It was during this time they noted he was wearing the exact shoe they had been looking for that matched the bloody print. They watched him walk around, and he had the same height, build, and distinctive walk as the figure in the video. And for the umpteenth time, Shawn changed the story again and admitted to being in Kathy's house looking to rob her while Tim waited outside. He said he got in through the unlocked back door, which he knew would be unlocked as Tim had told him. And once inside, he spent a few minutes creeping around from room to room looking for valuables.
He told me to go in the house and get the stuff.
Came in through where? The back door, you said?
Yeah, it was open. Yeah, I turned on a couple lights in rooms where I didn't see her. I found the room where she was, and she was fast asleep. That was the room her jewelry box was in.
Okay.
And so I opened the jewelry box, took the stuff out, put it in the thing. Maybe he went back, I don't know, but I didn't kill her.
He went into her bedroom and emptied out the jewellery box, but claimed that Kathy was still alive and undisturbed when he left, something which, put simply, could never have been true. With everything thrown at him and after almost 5 hours in the interrogation room, Shawn confessed to murdering Kathy Blair.
She woke up, she lunged at me, grabbed the knife, started trying to wrestle it out of my hand. And then it was a struggle, and I stabbed her in the neck. I didn't even want to do it. I was trying to get the jewelry without doing it.
You get to keep any of it?
No, he didn't give me anything. I got nothing. You're gonna have to ask him where he fenced it.
He had gone in to rob the place and Kathy was sleeping. As he grew closer, she woke up and lunged at him to fight him off. He then stabbed her in the neck, ran out with the valuables, and gave them to Tim to pawn. He made no mention of Billie and Sidney Shelton, however, but police knew they were all connected. Shawn, someone police genuinely believed Tim had pulled out of thin air, was now sat in front of them, admitting to everything. His behaviour was so detached. He was either chatty and conversational, or yawning and acting like the whole thing was a huge inconvenience to him. Investigators were now even more confused because they knew he had done this all for nothing. He had gained nothing, as Tim had taken all of the valuables, not giving him anything back. To this day, authorities say they cannot fathom why Shawn wanted to be involved. They placed 30-year-old Shawn under arrest for the murder of Kathy Blair, and although they had strong suspicions, they did not have enough evidence to charge him in the Shelton murders. However, they did have enough to charge Tim Parlin with all three. In Texas, if you're complicit in a crime, you can be held equally responsible. So given what he had said about Shawn killing all three people, police charged him with capital murder in all three homicides. He did not even need to have stepped a foot inside either house. They believed that not only was Tim complicit, he was actually the mastermind behind everything. The confessions, Kathy's blood in Tim's car, the cell phone data putting them at the scenes, the pawned necklace, the shoe print, and the video filmed by Rob, all made for a strong case.
Let's face it, in Austin, Texas, the possibility of being murdered by a stranger is very low, and that's why these violent crimes and these violent homicides has really shaken the foundation of our community. During the investigation, detectives interviewed Timothy Scott Parlin. During one of the interviews, Parlin stated he was called to the area of Tamarack Trail to pick up a suspect by the name of Shawn Grant Ben Alcazar. Ben Alcazar has been charged with capital murder for the murder of Kathy Blair. Investigators further believe that Timothy Parlin and Shawn Grant Ben Alcazar were actively involved in the burglary of the Sheltons' home and the deaths of Billie and Sidney Shelton. These investigations are ongoing, and detectives continue to pursue all leads and information related to the incidents that I just described. It is critical for this community to note the Austin Police Department is still requesting the public's assistance with any information in reference to any of the cases that I just described. And I don't care if you're a pawn shop, I don't care if you're just a person walking down the street. We're not interested in you. We're interested in bringing justice to the families of three people that have brutally been taken from us.
3 years ago today, Austin singer and choir instructor Kathy Blair was murdered in her home. Tonight, the two men charged in connection with her death remain in Travis County Jail. They've yet to see their day in court.
Both men pleaded not guilty, and it came as no surprise that 3 years later, when their trials began, they would still be turning on each other in court. Shawn's new line of defense was that his confession was totally made up, something he felt he had to say to get the police off his back. He added that because of the Valium in his system, he was not in a fit enough state to be answering anything and should not have been under such scrutiny.
I was led to believe that I would be charged with it regardless, and that the only way that I was going to, I thought that I was going to be charged with it regardless, and I was told that the only thing I could do to mitigate the circumstances would be to give a reason.
But his confession had been so specific, only the killer would know those details.
Shawn Grant Ben Alcazar entered court Wednesday and gave a quick wave to some friends he recognized back in the room.
This defendant's the murderer. There's no evidence that Tim Parlin went in that house, that Tim Parlin went in that closet.
The man walked in there to kill her, and to kill her slow and ugly. That's not random.
Jury heard from specialists who processed blood and DNA evidence collected from the crime scene, and no hair follicles were traced back to Grant Ben Alcazar. But a small blood spot was found on his jacket and tested. Prosecutors admit it's not conclusive evidence, but it is important.
Did you go into Kathy Blair's home?
No, I did not.
Have you ever gone into her home?
No, I have not.
Did you kill Kathy?
No, I did not.
Thursday, the jury is expected to watch a video where he not only talks about that, but also confesses to killing Kathy Blair. Why admit to being part of a crime then?
Well, I think that he was overwhelmed.
The defense will challenge the confession, not by focusing on the words spoken, but how the interrogation was done.
Well, what it was is that they did not read him his rights, even after it becomes, you'll see tomorrow, after it becomes apparent that he is a suspect, at least in the burglary. They don't read him his rights. They don't read him his rights until they are done asking every question that they want to. And we just think that's not fair. We think that the law is that they should have to read him his rights. And so that's our big problem.
In April 2018, after a lengthy 19 hours of deliberating, the judge was forced to declare a mistrial. They failed to reach a unanimous verdict as one person said they could not take the confession at face value. This became a huge issue for the rest of the jury, who were adamant he was guilty, and things did not end so well with their discussions.
Jurors say things became borderline hostile, especially when one juror refused to participate in the discussion. This comes as a disappointment to both jurors and the prosecution.
It's hard. We would have liked to stay and done our job, and it was very difficult, but it wasn't going to happen.
Very disappointed, of course. A lot of work has gone into getting this case to trial. It's been several years in the making.
There were some still on the fence, and by day 2 they had moved over a little bit, but we still had one holdout and not guilty, and it just became contentious and difficult.
One juror who asked not to be identified said the one holdout eventually stopped participating in the discussion. The jury thought the video of Gant Benalcazar's confession was going to lead to a unanimous vote.
So much of the confession that he made in Galveston matched up with facts that then were corroborated.
Now, a family spokesman says the Blair family is frustrated that they cannot get the justice they felt a guilty verdict today would have brought.
It was now back to the beginning for the prosecution. While the teams got on with prepping for Shawn's new trial, the attention was now on 53-year-old Tim Parlin, and the prosecution decided not to seek the death penalty. He was still sticking to his story. Shawn had killed everyone without his knowledge, and he just pawned some jewellery to get some quick cash. However, this verdict was far easier to reach. In May 2018, after just 3 hours, he was found guilty. He was sentenced to mandatory life in prison, with no chance of parole.
A man found guilty of planning the killings of an elderly couple and a music teacher in Austin will spend the rest of his life in prison.
Parlin was found guilty on 5 charges of capital murder in total.
It's a good day. This is a good day. We're very thankful that the jury made the right decision.
Prosecution called Parlin the mastermind behind the killings. It took the jury less than 3 hours to come back with that guilty verdict.
It's a great day for my mom and dad. We finally got justice for them. We'll never bring my mom and dad back. It will never bring Kathy Blair back. But we might have saved somebody else by getting him off the streets.
Well, Robert, it's been about 6 months since the first jury heard this case, could not come to a unanimous verdict, and forced a mistrial. Now, today, after just about 2.5 hours of deliberations, family members, loved ones of Kathy Blair say they're relieved.
In his second trial, 34-year-old Shawn was also convicted of capital murder in Kathy's case. He received the same sentence as Tim, life in prison with no chance of parole. He maintains that his confession was a fabrication and that Tim was the killer. And in 2020, he filed an unsuccessful appeal. After 4 long years and 3 trials, Travis County prosecutors had finally closed 3 complicated cases. The police had worked so hard on solving it, leaving no stone unturned, even if that meant a long wait for justice. Rob, Kathy's neighbour, who also played a pivotal role, was commended by the Austin Police Department. His thermal video had been so important. Detectives said that Tim and Shawn were nothing but sadistic, greedy monsters, especially Shawn, who gained nothing. He just wanted to take 3 lives for no reason. And we don't know about you, but it never ceases to amaze us how greed, with even the smallest of gains, can be such a driving force for people to commit the most horrific crimes. Sidney and Billie Shelton went to bed excited for the upcoming festivities and spoiling their grandchildren over the holidays. They died together, frightened, vulnerable, and unable to even fight back. Kathy's sister said at the end of the day she's gone. I can't call her tonight. Murder leaves a gaping hole, and time heals, but it's still a wound. You get on with life and do the best you can, but there's always just that something missing. For those of you that like to listen on the go, we now have our episodes in podcast form, and you can now find this via the link in our description box or by searching Truly Criminal Podcast on your podcasting platforms.